Assalamu alaikum and welcome to another live stream with brother Adnan Rashid. First and foremost, brothers and sisters, let me apologize for starting late. The reason is because we decided pretty much last minute to change today's topic. Now, before you switch off, what we're going to be addressing today is an extremely pertinent topic, a very, very important topic, which, to be honest, is probably the what needs to be addressed first before we address topics on the tolerance of Islam, etc. At the moment, especially the times that we find ourselves in today. So the topic we're going to be discussing is the preservation of the Quran. We're going to be talking about the preservation of the Quran generally with brother Adnan Rashid. We're going to be then going into specific areas of the preservation of the Quran, and we're going to get Adnan's take on this because this is something that's been coming up a lot quite recently. There are several academics who have, Western academics who have made some insinuations against the preservation of the Quran, etc. So we're going to, dispel some of the myths and look at these things in a lot of detail and really try to today clarify for you guys the fact that the Quran is indeed preserved, inshallah, with brother Adnan Rashid. Assalamu alaikum, brother Adnan. How are you?
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How's things?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah.
By the way, Adnan, the last live stream we did on Sadhguru actually got a lot of traction. SubhanAllah, a lot of people watched it and a lot of people gave loads of positive feedback and comments on it too. Although at the moment we haven't had the aggressive right come out and attack us. It's been predominantly Muslims who have been commenting this time around, alhamdulillah, and they found it very beneficial. They were asking if we could do more live streams in the future on that particular topic, inshallah. You're going to be doing some videos on Sadhguru on your channel, I assume, as well soon, right? A series.
Yes,
something.
I'm going to be looking at some of the quotes from Sadhguru, and I'll be talking about that, inshallah, in the future. Some of the things he has said in his videos, I want to pick on those things, especially things to do with history. Inshallah, I will be addressing some of those topics.
Inshallah. So, brothers and sisters, before we get into the topic, one thing I want you guys to do is please share this live stream with all of your contacts on your social media pages. Trust me when I say this is going to be extremely beneficial to all of the Muslims and to non-Muslims, inshallah. It's a very, very important topic that we're going to clarify today. Also, one more thing I want you to keep in mind is that the live is happening on my channel right now, but make sure once the live is done to go over to brother Adnan's channel, Adnan Rashid, in about 2 hours time or so, and the video will be uploaded on his channel as the video. So make sure you share the one on his channel, and it will obviously come on my channel tomorrow. It'll appear because it's going to take time processing, but make sure you share his version from his channel. Very important you guys do this, please, inshallah. So without further ado, brother Adnan, let's get into this. We've done a video on this before on the Epistemics channel. You uploaded it recently on your channel. The preservation of the Quran. Now, there's a claim that we Muslims make, right? That the Quran is preserved. What was given to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam during revelation over 1400 years ago were the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that came to the Prophet, that were delivered to the Prophet by angel Gabriel or Jibreel, and he then communicated those words verbatim to the companions who wrote them down, right? And that's exactly what we have today as far as what we call the Quran, the Mus'haf today in our hands. Take it, bro, give us a nice brief history, cover this topic. How do you establish the Quran is preserved, bro? Give us some details, inshallah.
Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Brother Imran, thank you very much for inviting me for another live stream. Today, the intention was to talk about tolerance in Islam, which we will, inshallah, in the future. We will talk about it in the future whenever it's convenient for us to do so. Today, the reason we changed the topic on short notice is because there's a lot of talk about the Quran in the town, as they say, right? Recently, there was a discussion between Yasir Qadi from the US and Muhammad Hijab in the UK, and they talked about the Quran, and some of the statements were made in this discussion, and some people out there have picked on those statements and they have cut those statements from a very lengthy discussion, and they are commenting on those statements, trying to insinuate that the Quran is not as preserved as Muslims claim, right? This has been going on for the last 2-3 days, and we want to address this issue head on, straight to the topic, straight to the point. Okay, when we say Quran, what do we mean by the Quran? Why do we believe it's preserved? And what is the evidence for that preservation? What do modern researchers have to say about it? What do Western scholars, non-Muslim Western scholars, have to say about this? Okay, and do we have any examples of the preservation of the Quran? Any evidence, any hard, solid, tangible, physical evidence for that particular preservation we claim, right? So these are the things we will be discussing today. So I would like to apologize in the very beginning, that we were not able to cover the issue of tolerance this week. We will do that, inshallah, in the coming weeks. Today, we will be discussing in particular, specifically, the preservation of the Quran. And let me give you the glad tiding, the good news. The way we will do it today, I don't think it has been done before in this way. I repeat, the way we will cover the preservation of the Quran today, I don't think this topic has been done like this in the English language before. What do I mean by that? You will see exactly what I mean by that when we proceed with this particular live stream, inshallah ta'ala. Okay, so today we will be addressing the point of the Quran. Firstly, what is the definition of the Quran? What is the Quran? What do we mean by the word Quran? What does it mean? What is the Quran? Okay, the Quran is what the following definition explains. Okay, the definition is given by Imam Zarqani. Okay, in his book Manahil al-Irfan fi Ulum al-Quran. Okay, fi Ulum al-Quran. This is the book of Imam Zarqani where he gives the following definition. To basically use a short term to describe the book's title is Manahil of Imam Zarqani, and the definition goes as follows: the Quran is the Arabic speech of Allah, which he revealed to Muhammad in wording and meaning, and which has been preserved in the mushafs and has reached us by mutawatir transmissions, and is a challenge to mankind to produce something similar to it. Okay, I repeat, the Quran is the Arabic speech of Allah, which he revealed to Muhammad in wording and meaning, and which has been preserved in the mushafs. Mushafs means physical copies, and has reached us by mutawatir transmission. Mutawatir means continuous transmission without any breaks in the middle, from generation to generation, by multiple attestations, by multiple people, by multiple communities in the past, and is a challenge to mankind to produce something similar to it. In other words, the Quran is a challenge to mankind to produce something like it. What it did to humanity, what the results it produced as, for example, in the form of the Islamic civilization and all that. Okay, so this is the definition of the Quran to begin with. Now, based upon this definition, we will present our evidence whether the Quran, which was actually given to the Prophet of Islam, as we the Muslims claim, right, or as the Prophet claimed, that the Quran is a revelation directly from God Almighty, the creator of the heavens and the earth. Okay, he is the one who gave the Quran to the Prophet, and then he delivered this Quran to his companions, and his companions delivered that very Quran in two forms: the physical form in copies, and the oral form, the reading form, in a multiply attested transmission, generation to generation. Okay, this is how the Quran was transmitted to us, and we will see whether that particular Quran is with us today, and it has been transmitted word by word. Okay, so we will cover the issues step by step. In the beginning, we will play a video about the preservation of the Quran, okay, about the physical copies of the Quran, and we will deal with one particular copy that has been carbon dated to going back to the life of the Prophet himself. Going back to the life of the Prophet himself, this particular copy has been carbon dated. The reason we will read from that particular copy and show that particular copy is because it has been carbon dated. It is an ancient copy. It comes from the very life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, according to the carbon dating, according to the radiocarbon dating results. Okay, so after that, we will play another clip where a scholar is talking about the preservation of the Quran. It's a short clip. Then we will read from that very physical copy and do a comparison between that physical copy from the 1st century of Islam, that copy which comes from the lives of the Prophet and his companions, and see how it actually supports word by word the modern copies of the Quran. The one in my hand here, right here in front of me, right? This is a modern copy of the Quran that has been printed in Saudi Arabia. We will see how it is exactly the same. That 1st century copy of the Quran, the physical copy that comes from the life of the Prophet and his companions, is exactly the same as what we read today in my physical copy. And then we will read some Western quotes from Western scholars who substantiate the preservation of the Quran in its current form, and they support the notion, the Islamic traditional notion, that the Quran has been authentically preserved. It is exactly what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam gave to his companions, and what his companions delivered to us, and what we possess with us today is what Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam taught to his companions in the 1st century of Islam and the 7th century of Common Era. Okay, and then we will play a clip by Yasir Qadi and see what he said and how it was deliberately misconstrued by some Christian missionaries and other anti-Islam polemicists out there who are always waiting for opportunities to pick on vagueness, on ambiguous statements that are made about things that they claim were not actually discussed in the very quote or the very discussion. So Yasir Qadi, for example, was talking about one thing and the Christian missionaries are claiming another from it, right? So let's inshallah start with the very first clip from the BBC about the Birmingham parchment that can be found in the Birmingham University Library.
Before we go to that clip, bro, I want you to quickly give me, because I know this is common knowledge now, but it's good to just touch upon this, assuming that we have people that don't even understand the basics of preservation. So you mentioned that the Quran was an oral tradition, or is orally preserved, and it was preserved in written form. Now, when we say as Muslims it was orally preserved, to the 21st century individual, this seems like a bold and wild claim, bro, because we're not a part of a tradition which deals with memorization and poetry, etc., right? So give us a bit of context as to why that is such a substantial claim from the Islamic perspective. What was it about the Arabs at the time, right, that to claim it was an oral tradition and it was preserved orally is not a far-fetched claim? Give us a bit more information about the oral aspect.
Look, the Arabs were not a literary people when the Quran came to them, and the reason why the Quran is a miracle, because the way it has been preserved, to the extent it has been preserved, and the people who preserved it, when you put all of this together, it is nothing short of a miracle. Why? The Arabs were not writers. They were not writers. They were memorizers. They were readers. The Arabs did not have a literary tradition when it comes to writing. The Byzantines, the Romans, for example, and the Persians had a literary tradition when it comes to writing. They had a literary text which was standardized, right? The Arabs, it took them a very long time to standardize even the Arabic alphabets. So the Arabic alphabets are basically adopted from alphabets from other regions, right? So the Arabic language was actually standardized when it comes to the alphabets after the revelation of the Quran, because there was now a need to write down the word of Allah. Prior to that, the Arabs memorized everything, orally. It was the knowledge, information, books, literature was transmitted orally. For example, the Arabs had a very powerful poetical tradition, so they would memorize poems upon poems, running into thousands of verses by heart. They would memorize by heart, okay? And they would memorize them impeccably, okay? If someone was to get a verse wrong, the others would correct him, because they would memorize the diwans, the collections of poets in memory. So, for example, what poets are we talking about? We're talking about pre-Islamic points like Antar bin Shaddad. Antar bin Shaddad, his poetry was memorized by pre-Islamic Arabs. It was then transmitted to the Islamic Arabs who became Muslims, and then the Muslim Arabs transmitted the poetry of Antar bin Shaddad to posterity, to the future generations, and they memorized the poetry of Antar bin Shaddad. Likewise, the poetry of Amr al-Qais, okay, who was another poet who was born not very long before the advent of the Prophet of Islam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was a very close, I wouldn't say he was a contemporary, but he had died just before the advent of the Prophet of Islam, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. His poetry was memorized by the Arabs. His poetry was memorized by the Muslim Arabs. His poetry was then transmitted to the future generations, to the Muslims, to preserve the purity of the Arabic language. So in other words, if the Arabs were so diligent about memorizing the poetry of their poets, why wouldn't they memorize the word of Allah, the word of God, the one who created the heavens and the earth, the one who created the universe? So this is why Allah chose the Arabs to do the job, to show that Allah can do what he wants. Inna Allah ala kulli shay'in qadir. That Allah, if he wants these illiterate people who do not have a literary tradition to preserve the final message for humanity, he can use them to do it. Okay, if the Byzantines had done it, the Romans, then people could have said, oh, they were a literary people. They had large libraries. They had such an old tradition, of the Greek language. They were reading and writing in Greek. The Persians next door, they were reading and writing in their ancient Persian Pahlavi text, for example, the one we found written on the walls of temples and other inscriptions around Persia. So they could have said these people were a literary people. They were educated. The Arabs are not educated in that sense. That's why Allah used them to preserve the Quran. Not only orally, they memorized it, but they wrote it down in physical copies. So the Quran was transmitted to us in two forms: the physical form, the masahif, the copies, the physical copies, and with it a parallel tradition to it as to how they read the Quran. So the physical text and the reading of it, how will we actually read and pronounce the words of the Quran? So these are the two traditions. The first form is called the masahif, the copies, the physical copies, and the second form is called the qira'at, the readings, right? So this is how the Quran was transmitted, if we were to simplify it. Yeah.
And you know what's just, I was thinking about this, is what's even more beautiful. See, when you get revelation from Allah, the objective is that human beings live by it. It changes their being. It changes their lives. Now, what better way for that to manifest than for that text or that revelation to be internalized by heart by people, so that not only are they reading it off paper, but that it's a part of their being. They've memorized it, so they're living with it. It's always with them. So there's a great wisdom there from that perspective, that the Quran is given to a people who are known for their oral tradition, memorizing things by heart. So when
they were memorizing their genealogies going back 20, 30, 40 generations.
Who in the right mind would want to do that, man?
Brother Imran, they memorized the genealogies of their horses.
Wow.
The Arabs in the pre-Islamic times, they would know that the horse that belongs to a certain chief, for example, a certain chief from a tribe, his horse was born to the mare of a certain, for example, belonging to a certain tribe, and that mare mated with the male horse, for example, from another tribe. So they would know exactly where the descendant of horses is coming from, let alone humans, right? Right. So they were very, very, very expert memorizers. That's why the Quran was sent down upon these people, so that they can memorize the word of Allah in the Arabic language and transmit it to the future generations, inshallah.
And someone that's going to memorize the genealogy of horses, bro, something as insignificant as that, as trivial as that, then it just makes no sense that they would not memorize the words of God, you know, in
Yes.
a way that it's preserved
And
to the
and
nth
and
degree.
not only that, they taught themselves now how to read, and write physically, while they were not experts in that before. But the Quran enabled them to become more educated, to be able to read and write. And it was um, the Quran that inspired that revolution in the Arab world, and then the rest of the Muslim civilization, which expanded from China to Spain within a century from the Prophet's death, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That the Arabic language became the lingua franca of the world. The Arabic language became the language of civilization. The Arabic language became the language of the most educated people in the world for 5 centuries.
Yep.
From the 9th century to the 13th century, the Arabic language was the lingua franca of the world, just like the English language is today. The English language is the language of the educated people, right? Likewise, for 5 centuries, because of that inspiration that came from the Quran, that reading and writing, which the Arabs mastered as a result of the revelation of the Quran, because they felt the need to preserve the Quran in physical copies as well as in an oral form for the future generations. Let's move on to the video, inshallah, so that we can get on.
The oldest Quran from Birmingham video, right?
Yes.
Okay, just gonna play that for you now.
Let's play the video and let's talk about it, inshallah.
Oldest fragments of the Quran, one of the oldest fragments of the Quran ever discovered. It's written on parchment, most likely made from sheep or goat skin, and it's been dated by experts as being more than 1,300 years old. And that makes it among the earliest known fragments of the Quran anywhere in the world. And it's here in the University of Birmingham. This remarkable document had been resting on the shelves of the university library for decades without anybody realizing just how old it was, until a researcher decided to take a closer look. The pages were radiocarbon dated to no later than the year 645, which means the university has found one of the very earliest known examples.
Finding out that we had one of the oldest fragments of the Quran in the whole world was fantastically exciting, individually and for the university as well. I mean, we were expecting it to be early, but we did not, I think, in our wildest dreams, expect that it would roughly correlate to the lifespan of the Prophet Muhammad, which makes it an incredibly early Quranic fragment.
The manuscript had been stored here in a collection of Middle Eastern documents brought to Birmingham in the 1920s. Academics here say that this discovery goes back to the earliest years of Islam.
The person who actually wrote it may well have known the Prophet Muhammad. He would have seen him probably. He would maybe have heard him preach. He may have known him personally. And that really is quite a thought to conjure with.
Birmingham has one of the country's biggest Muslim communities, and they have welcomed having such a treasure in their city.
When I saw these pages, I was very much moved, and there were tears of joy and emotions in my eyes. And I am quite sure that even the people from all over UK would come here to Birmingham to just have a glimpse of these pages. People would love this.
This is an exceptionally rare and valuable discovery, and the university says it will be put on public display. It has no intention of letting these pages from world history leave Birmingham. Sean Coughlin, BBC News.
Okay, great. So what do we have here? We have the Birmingham parchment. It's called the Birmingham Quran. Okay, if you Google Birmingham Quran, you will find links to the Birmingham Library where the Quran, this particular parchment or these particular pages are preserved. They actually were acquired. They were acquired by a man called Mingana, and they belong to the Mingana collection, right? And to cut the long story short, I'm going to repeat the most important points made in this video. This is one of the oldest copies of the Quran, okay? And this opinion is not based upon paleography. Paleography is the study of the text, the physical text. It's not entirely based upon that. The opinion is actually based upon radiocarbon dating. Radiocarbon dating gives you an estimated date of the antiquity of the materials you are trying to date. So in this case, radiocarbon dating suggests that this particular parchment was produced between the year 568 to 645. Okay, I repeat, between the years 568 CE and 645 CE. When was the Prophet born? The year 570, and he died in 632 CE. In other words, this parchment, according to the scholarly opinion, according to the radiocarbon dating of this particular parchment was produced within the lifespan of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam.
SubhanAllah. So,
Okay,
so
let me repeat that in case people don't get confused. What these scholars and experts were saying on that documentary produced by the BBC and people from the Birmingham University, what they are saying is that this particular copy or these particular pages of the Quran can be dated back to the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, according to the radiocarbon dating. Okay, is that clear to you, Brother Imran?
yes. So I was gonna ask you a question on that. When they radiocarbon date the parchment, are it's the parchment itself that they're dating, or is it the ink on the paper, or is it both? How does that work?
It's the actual skin, it's the actual material. They carbon date the material, and basically the dating tells you when the animal was killed, because it is vellum, it comes from goats, it is basically goat skin. Okay, it is the membrane between the skin and the meat. I don't know if you have ever had the honor of slaughtering a goat. Okay, when they skin the goat, okay, you see a white membrane between the skin, and that white membrane is dried, and then it at that time in the ancient world, these parchments were used to write documents. For example, some of the ancient biblical manuscripts are on parchment. For example, Codex Sinaiticus, which can be found in the British Library, is on the same material, parchments, right? Likewise, in the ancient world, it was common practice to write documents, precious documents, in particular scripture, on parchments. So this particular parchment, the animal was killed according to the radiocarbon dating within the life of the Prophet, peace be upon him. And it is highly likely that it was penned, it was written according to the study of paleography. Even the text, it is very, very ancient. It is early Hijazi script. It is very, very early Arabic writing. So both basically facts correlate. Okay, the dating of the parchment and the text that is used to write this particular parchment are very, very early, and they're from the 7th century, as the report stated that it is at least 1,300 years old. Okay, so it's more than 1,300 years old, 100 years old. So that means it is from potentially from the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions. Definitely from the life of the Prophet's companions. Definitely 100% from the life of his companions. So now it is clear that it is one of the oldest copies of the Quran in the world, which dates back to the 1st century of Islam, when the Prophet and his companions were alive. Some people even believe that this copy is what was produced during the time of Abu Bakr or Uthman. Okay, this may be part of those copies that were produced during the time of Abu Bakr and Uthman. Okay, it's a matter of opinions, right? But it is definitely from the 1st century. So let's read from it.
Yes,
let's read from a copy of the Quran from the 1st century and see how similar it is to my copy in my hand today, printed in Saudi Arabia today. Okay, so here we have the text on the screen.
Just before you do this, Adnan Bhai, let me just make sure that, brothers and sisters, just two things. I know we're not addressing your questions as we go along, because I don't want to lose the flow of where this discussion is going, because it's very important to clarify these points and ensure that they come across in a very clear and methodological sort of structure. So we're going to address your questions at the end of what needs to be discussed. And secondly, please, if you haven't already, make sure to share this with everyone on your social media links. Just copy the link and share it so other people can benefit from this too, inshallah. So Adnan bhai, I'm going to pass it back over to you. And
Okay, I want you to take the cursor from word to word. Okay.
Yep.
Okay. And I hope you can read this ancient Arabic. I can, alhamdulillah.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is the Arabic of the Prophet and his companions. Not that it is different to what we read in the Quran today, but the reason why I said that is because this is the script the Prophet's companions used to write the Quran. I repeat, this is the exact script that was used by the companions of the Prophet to write the Quran, and this copy is from their times. It has been radiocarbon dated to their time. So let's read it from the very first verse. Okay, this is the beginning of Surah Taha, by the way. Okay, Surah Taha is Surah 20. Surah Taha is chapter 20 of the Quran, and it reads as follow. I'm going to read the parchment from my laptop screen, which is in front of me right now, because I cannot see the screen on my phone, which is very, very small.
So
So I'm going to read the same. Okay. So if you follow with the cursor, please start with Bismillah. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Okay. Taha. Taha. Okay. This is exactly what is written in my modern copy here. It is in front of me. I'm doing a comparison word by word.
And
word by word. Yes.
While you go through these, I noticed these dots after Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Ayah separators.
Okay.
Ayah separators. Ayah separators. Yes. This is these dots separate the verses. Subhanallah. Even the verses were separated as early as that. Okay.
Wow.
So we have done Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm pretty sure everyone can decipher Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim thus far. Okay. The script is ancient. It is early Hijazi script. So I don't expect everyone to read this. Okay. It can be read by experts, right? Now, next word after Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim immediately is Taha.
Yep.
Okay. Ta and Ha. Okay, is there. You can see it with the cursor.
Yep.
Good. Next one. Ma anzalna. Ma anzalna. Alayka. We go to the next line now, Brother Imran. Yeah. Alayka. This is alayka. Okay. Al-Qur'ana. Alayka al-Qur'ana. Okay. Litashqa. Litashqa. Okay. Exactly word by word what we have in our modern copy here. Okay. The ancient Quran is on my screen on the laptop here in front of me. Okay. I'm reading from a laptop here. Okay. And then I have the modern copy opened in front of me right here. Okay.
We'll bring the
so I'm gonna go to the next verse now. Okay. Illa tazkiratan. Illa tazkiratan liman yakhsha. Okay. Now next verse. Next verse after that. Okay. Tanzilan. It's the next verse. Okay. Next line.
Next line. Yep.
Okay. The first word of the next line is tanzilan. Ta, noon. Okay. Za and ya and lam. Okay. Lam alif. Tanzilan. Mimman. Okay. Khalaqal arda was samawat al-ula. Okay. I'm reading it deliberately in a broken way so that people can actually see the exact words I'm reading. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm breaking the words. Okay.
We're at the end of the third. We're at the end of the third line.
Okay.
Now, right?
Tanzilan mimman khalaqal arda was samawati al-ula. Okay. This is how you read it in flow, but I'm breaking it down. Next verse. The very next line, the first word of the next line is Ar-Rahmanu. Okay, put the cursor on that, please. Ar-Rahmanu alal arshi istawa. Okay, is that clear? Yep. Exactly the same words in the modern copy of the Quran. The one I'm reading from is a 7th century copy from the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his companions. Okay. This copy is more than 1,300 years old. It has been dated, radiocarbon dated to the life of the Prophet ﷺ himself. Okay, so it's exactly what is in my modern copy here in my hands. Okay, now next verse, lahu. Can you see lahu?
Yep, I think I'm following you still.
Lahu, after the dots, you know where it's, where the word istawa is. After istawa, okay, there are dots, 4 dots, and then lahu ma fis samawati.
Yep, we're
Ma fis samawati. Ta is on the next line, by the way.
Got it.
Ta of samawat is on the next line. Okay, wa ma fil ardi. Have you got it? Wa ma fil ardi, the cursor.
Yeah.
Okay. Wa ma baynahuma.
SubhanAllah.
Okay.
I'm surprised at how much I can make out from, even though
Allahu Akbar. Yes. When you go slowly, you can. Wama tahta thura. Okay. Wama tahta athura. Athura is on the next line, the beginning of the next line. Then 4 dots again. Or a few more dots. Okay. Okay. Wa in tajhar. Yes. Wa in tajhar bil qawli fa innahu ya'lamu sirra. Ya'lamu sirra. Okay, as-sirra, that's where the verse ends on this line. And then the next line, wa akhfa. Okay? And then the next verse, Allahu la ilaha illa huwa lahul asma'ul husna. Allahu Akbar. Okay? So al-husna again is the first word on the next line. Have you got your cursor on al-husna? Okay. Okay. Then the next verse, wa hal ataka hadithu Musa. And then after Musa you have 5 dots. Okay, ayah separator. Then iz ra'ana. Sorry, izra'a naran. Sorry, no, it's izra'a naran. Okay, is separate to ra'a and then naran. Okay, is the last word of the line, and the next word in the next line is ra'a naran. Izra'a naran faqala li ahlihi. Okay, faqala li ahlihi. Okay, now there is a very tiny small difference in the spelling here in faqala and the way faqala is written in the modern copy. Okay, faqala here is written with the invisible alif. Okay, you have fa, qaf, lam there. Can you put the cursor on it, please?
Here we go.
Okay, have you got? Do you have 1 second? Let me see if the cursor is in the right place.
I'm hopeful it is, bro. I'm pretty sure it is. Here, right here.
Yes, that's it. Exactly. There you see fa, qaf, and lam. Okay, so alif is invisible in this particular text. Okay, here in the modern copy they have pronounced the alif. Okay, so we move on. Okay, faqala li ahlihi. Okay, li ahlihim kuthu. Okay, imkuthu basically is the next word. Then inni. Okay. Anastu. Naran. Now we're going to the next word. Next line. Naran. La'alli. Okay. La'alli. Atikum. Yes. Did you see atikum? Minha. Biqabasin. Can you see biqabasin? O ajidu. Ala nari. And let me bring the screen up a little bit. Ala nari. You got it?
Yeah, it's the end of that line,
Huda.
right?
Ala nar, yeah, nar, basically lam, noon, and ra. Lam, noon, and arif and ra is on the next line.
Yep.
The first. Then huda.
Yep.
Okay, the word huda, and then dots.
Yes.
Okay. Falamma.
Yep.
Ataha. Falamma ataha. Nudiya. Ya Musa. Are you following me with the cursor? Okay.
Yep.
Inni ana rabbuka fakhla. Okay. Na'alayka. In other words, Allah is telling Musa alayhi salam to take off your shoes. Take off your shoes. Okay. Innaka bil wadil muqaddasi tuwa. Bilwadil muqaddasi tuwa. Okay. Wa ana, because I'm reading from the ancient copy, so it can because the diacritical marks are not there on this copy, because this is an ancient copy. The marks have not yet been added for the non-Arabs to read. Okay. Wa anakhtartuka, and this is where this page, this particular page ends. Okay. Now the verses before are, if you go to the verses before beyond Bismillah, those are the last verses of Surah Maryam. Okay. Are they exactly the same? Okay. Are they exactly the same? Let's go to the last verse. Let's go to the last verse of Surah Maryam. Okay. So text we have read so far from the 7th century copy of the Quran, physical copy that comes from the life of the Prophet and his companions. Okay. According to the non-Muslim Western scholars, we showed you in the BBC documentary. Okay. This copy comes from the life of the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The text we read is exactly the same, okay, is what we find in the modern copy printed in Saudi Arabia. Here we have.
We're going to bring it up right on the screen as well eventually.
Okay, we don't have to. Here, people can do a comparison. But when people are looking at this video, when they're watching this video, they can put the modern copy in front of them and they can follow the text. Okay. Now, let's go to the verse before. So another point we learn here: the surah order in the life of the Prophet, okay, and the companions is exactly the same, because the surah before is Surah Maryam, chapter 19 of the Quran, the chapter about the mother of Jesus Christ.
So no, but I think this needs to really, subhanAllah, let me just emphasize this once more. What we're seeing here is not only is the text the same, literally, but the breaking of the ayat, where they stop and where they end, is the same, and even the order of the surahs is the same from what we have in front of us.
Yes, absolutely. There you have it. The copies there is from the life of the Prophet and his companions. The copy is there in front of you. You can read it. You can read it today. It's exactly word by word what you read in your modern copies, word by word. This is the standardization of the Prophet's companions. This is what they read. This is what they gazed upon as their copies of the Quran. What you are looking at on the screen is what a companion of the Prophet ﷺ would have looked at as his copy of the Quran. Okay, so let's go to the verse, the last verse of Surah Maryam. Is it exactly the same? Okay, the last verse of Surah Maryam, and we will start with, you see the dots? After the second, there is a wa. Can you see the wa? On the second last line.
One second. I think I'm on the previous, the ayah before. Yes, I got it. Okay.
Wa, just after the dots. Wa, come to the last line, or the second last line, basically. Wa, come. Okay. This is now verse number 98 of Surah Maryam. Verse number 98 of Surah Maryam in your modern copies of the Quran. Okay. Chapter 19 of the Quran. Okay. What does it read? Wa kam ahlakna. Ahlakna. Qablahum min qarnin. Min, are you on min? Your cursor? Qarnin. Okay. Hal tuhissu minhum. Are you on minhum? Min ahadin. Aw tasma. Okay, أو تسمعوا لهم ركزا. Okay, lahum rikza or rikzam. Okay, how, depending on how you want to end it. Okay, so exactly the same as what I have in front of me with the modern copy. Exactly the same. I have Surah Taha and Surah Maryam open in front of me here. Okay, here. Okay, and you can look at the copy there on the screen. Allahu Akbar. So all you have to say to all these people out there talking all sorts of making all sorts of incredible claims that the Quran is not preserved, the Quran is not the same as what you read today in your modern copies, the Quran of the Prophet and the Quran of the companions is not exactly the same as what you read. Now tell us, how is it not the same? I just read it in front of you. Anyone who knows Arabic alphabets, anyone who is able to read the ancient Arabic text, which I read in front of you, and some of you, I'm pretty sure, because you know the Arabic language and can read modern Arabic, were able to read it. Brother Imran, could you read it?
I was surprised. I was thinking, okay, I'm not going to be able to follow this much, but as you were going through it, I started recognizing in literally what we went through was the story of Musa alayhi salam in the beginning of Surah Taha.
Exactly.
Family and because I have a working knowledge of Arabic now, alhamdulillah, where I can understand quite a bit of it. Bro, reading it was I don't know how to put it. It was just an experience for myself as well. May Allah bless you, jazakallah khair. Because it just, I don't know, it was amazing, bro. It's literally the same.
This is what Muslims need to see. This is what Muslims need to see, that you can actually read from an ancient copy of the Quran. Okay. And you can see that it's exactly the same. And we did this exercise and it took us about 10 to 20 minutes, I think, something like that, right? I invite you to open any ancient copy of the Quran. There are many, by the way, like this one. This is one of the few that have been carbon dated. There are thousands of other copies from the 1st century of Islam, from the lives of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, that need to be carbon dated. For example, the Husseini Mosque manuscript in Cairo. For example, the top copy manuscript in Istanbul. For example, St. Petersburg copy of the Quran, which comes from the 1st century. Then the Sana manuscripts, okay, that were discovered not very long ago in Yemen. Okay, those manuscripts. So if I ask you, Brother Imran, to go on the screen, okay, and put this website address, okay, very quickly, go on the screen and go on the net, go on the browser, inshallah.
Yep. 1 second.
Okay, and I want brothers and sisters to see this, inshallah ta'ala.
If you give me it first, bro, the link, I'll go to it and then I can share the screen, inshallah.
Okay, it's Islamic-awareness.org. Okay, I want everyone to visit this website, Islamic-awareness, okay, .org.
Just give me a second, I'm loading it now. Okay, I'm just going to share the screen so everyone can see it. Here we go, should be up.
Okay, there you go. Can you click on the Quran section where it says manuscripts? Is there a tab? Is there a tab for manuscripts?
Let me see. History, polemics, Bible, Hadith, Quran. Manuscripts, yes.
Click manuscripts.
Here we go.
Okay. I want all the brothers and sisters to go on this website and visit this page and look at the ancient copies, ancient manuscripts of the Quran from the 1st century. And there are scholarly opinions attached to them, what Western scholars have to say about these copies and where are these opinions coming from. All the academic references are there. You will see the actual physical pictures of these ancient copies of the Quran on this very page of this website. So the website is Islamic-awareness.org. Then go to the Quran section and then click manuscripts, and the list of manuscripts from the 1st century of Islam is there. There are so many that you will simply not cover all of them in one day. Maybe it will take you it'll take you days to go through all of them. Okay, we just read from one particular copy that has been carbon dated to the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, and we read it for a reason, so that people can see themselves that the text we have in our copies of the Quran today is exactly what the Prophet read and what his companions read and what they delivered to posterity, to the future generations. Now, Brother Imran, having shared this page, okay, we'll go to the next video of that scholar talking about the Quran and the preservation, and let's see what he has to say, inshallah.
So just to double check with you, bro, we're talking about the video. It says contemporary issues. Is the original Quran preserved? Dr.
Yes.
Joseph Lombard.
That's right. Play that video, please, from the very beginning.
This, if I'm not mistaken, this is the professor who was involved in the study Quran translation.
Yes, that's correct. He's a professor. He's involved in study Quran, and he is actually someone who can speak on the Quran.
In the Quran and all the speculations there have been regarding the compilation of the Quran within Western scholarship. Some would say that the Quran actually began earlier than the Muslims say it began, or some would say that the whole history of it actually went another 200 years after the time of the Prophet Muhammad. None of those are actually grounded in studies of the available manuscripts. As more and more manuscripts have become available, we've been able to confirm with greater and greater accuracy, scientifically, as empirically as one can, that the story that the Muslims have of the compilation of the Quran is, for the most part, accurate. As Karl Ernst has said, it is a better explanation of the data that we have available to us than any other theory that anyone has proposed. The most recent manuscript that was found, and the earliest manuscript of the Quran ever to be found, are the ones that were found in Sana'a, in Yemen, in the old mosque in Sana'a. And there was a lot of speculation when those manuscripts were first found. In fact, there was an article in the Atlantic Monthly about how this was going to tell us new things about the history of the Quran. Well, nobody had studied them at that point. This was just speculation. Now they've been studied, not all of them, but at least one folio has undergone rigorous analysis. And that rigorous analysis has demonstrated through carbon dating, one, that that manuscript does come at about the time when Muslims say the Quran was compiled. But then there's even an underscript of the Quran that's shown, that's on the parchment. What happens is, in the old days, when you used parchment, if you wanted to write something new on it, you didn't throw out the parchment because it was so expensive. You would erase what was on there, and then you would write something new. Now, the inks were also partially metal-based. So through infrared photography, we can actually get an image of what that Arabic script was that was on that parchment before the Quran as we know it was written on that parchment. That infrared photography has shown us that the surahs as we know them were there and intact. Furthermore, they even show that the slight variations that are in the text are ones that Muslims have attested. There wasn't anything that one could call a variant that Muslims had not attested was a variant of the Quran that had been transmitted by some Muslims. Now, the other thing is, if you think about it, if somebody were to make up a history of the text, you wouldn't have made it up the way that Muslims have the history written down. You would have said, well, it was written at this time, and then it was put down under the time of the Prophet Muhammad, and alhamdulillah, that was that. You wouldn't say, well, first, after he died, they didn't have it written down. Then under the Caliphate of Abu Bakr, it was written in one form. And then a few years later, around the year 650, it was put down in another compilation, and this was the final compilation. Nobody would make up that story. So even there, it is really an act of distrust on the part of the Orientalists to try to find different histories, A, than what the Muslims first accounted for, and B, what the manuscripts actually tell us.
Very
Okay, great. So this is very powerful. What he's saying is that the traditional history we have of the preservation of the Quran is accurate for the most part. Okay, how do we know that? The physical copies of the Quran, okay, confirm that tradition. What is the tradition? What is the traditional story? To summarize it very quickly, okay, the Prophet was given Quran in 7 different styles, in 7 different modes, because the Arabs, they spoke different dialects. They had different, pronunciations on different, dialects of the same language, the Arabic language. Okay, so the Quran was revealed initially, okay, and there were slight variations between what different tribes were reading at the time. Okay, the exact nature of those differences or those variations in pre-Uthmanic text, the one the one that can be found in some of the parchments underneath, because those parchments were washed, and then the text, the standardized text, the text that was standardized by Uthman radiallahu an, was written on top. Okay, and this text we read from may well be that text.
So
Okay.
Adnan, before I want you to give me a bit more clarification, because I'm thinking from a lay perspective, bro. What you're saying is revelation comes to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? Now, because there was different tribes and they had slight different dialects from northern and southern Arabia, except different parts of the peninsula, that the Quran came down and it had, so would you say, subtle variations or differences to accommodate for the different tribes? Is that what you're saying?
Basically, it was to make the reading of the Quran, okay, convenient for the Arabs, because when Jibreel brought the Quran in one mode, okay, the Prophet said, my people will not be able to read it, so Jibreel brought another mode, okay, and then the Prophet said, my people will not be able to read it, okay, in basically 2 modes, because they are different people in different regions of Arabia, and they speak differently. They speak the same language, but they speak differently. For example, to give you a crude example from today, Scottish English and London English, okay, they speak the same language, but it sounds very different. Okay, so the Prophet ﷺ, I mean, this is a crude example to give you something from our modern times, right? So Jibreel eventually he brought down the Quran in 7 different modes, exactly the same text. Okay, exactly the same text. The text and the content of the Quran is exactly the same, but it was read by the Arabs, okay, in their own ways, right? So there was slight flexibility, slight variation. Okay, those variations are well attested, well documented in the Islamic literature. What this professor was talking about. Okay, they have been acknowledged, attested. So this is pre-Uthmanic. All of these variations. Then what happened? New Muslims, basically, when they came to Islam from Iraq and from Egypt, they started to read these, different modes of the Quran, and they started to dispute with each other as to which mode is more authoritative, or which particular pronunciation, or which particular style of reading. Okay, whatever the nature of the text was before the Uthmanic standardization. Okay, so they started to read in different modes, and then Sahaba, Ashab Rasul, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they realized that we need to standardize the text, and the text has to be put in one mode or one way of reading, at least the text, okay, the physical copies of the Quran, so that people can follow those physical copies and read from those physical copies. So standardize the spellings, and with that, even the pronunciation of those Arabic words. So this is how it was done. Okay.
So I think one of the key points here is that,
so very quickly, Uthman ordered 4 people to get together. Okay, Zayd bin Thabit. Okay, now remember, a copy of the Quran was already made in the time of Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anh. Okay, according to the traditional view. According to the traditional view, which we find in Sahih al-Bukhari. Okay, the narrative of the preservation of the Quran. After the Prophet passed away, revelation stopped. The revelation stopped. So Omar basically came to Abu Bakr and he said to him, we must put the Quran between the 2 covers. Between 2 covers, like make a codex. Okay, because the Quran was scattered in memories and on different materials, on bones, on parchments, on tree leaves, on leather, whatever material the companions of the Prophet could find, they would writing the Quran on it. Okay, so Omar said, we have many memorizers of the Quran who have took the Quran directly from the Prophet. We are all alive now. Okay, and we don't want to leave any confusion about the word of Allah. So let's put it together, okay, in the order that was given to the Prophet, and given by the Prophet to us. So the Quran was put in current order, okay, from cover to cover. So cut the long story short, the Sahaba in the time of Abu Bakr, Zayd bin Thabit was the man who was a direct student of the Prophet ﷺ as far as the Quran in particular is concerned. Okay, I mean, by that virtue, all the companions were students, but there were some specific students of the Quran who were taking the Quran specifically from the Prophet.
And he was
Zayd bin Thabit was one of them. Okay,
he was a
so
scribe as well?
He was a scribe as well. He was a scribe of the Prophet. So all of this history is actually documented in a book. I strongly recommend. The book is The History of the Quranic Text from Revelation to the Compilation. Okay, from the Revelation to the Compilation. Okay, History of the Quranic Text by Muhammad Mustafa Al-Adami. Okay, the book, and get the second edition. Get the second edition, which is more detailed. Right. All of these details can be found in this book. Right. Really? So the Quran was put together in the time of Abu Bakr radiallahu anh in one copy. Okay. At that time, the spellings were not standardized. Okay. The spellings of the words were not standardized. It was simply to get put together the Quran. Okay. Whatever written form it was found in, that form was basically brought together by Zayd bin Thabit, and the Quran was put together in 2 covers as a codex. Okay, like this. Okay, now that was an early form of the collection. The purpose of that collection was to gather information, gather the text of the Quran. Okay, whatever early form it was found in. Okay, it was gathered. Later on, in the time of Uthman, when people were still reading those variations from the early period, those were from one of those 7 modes, for example. Okay, then the companions, they decided that they should basically standardize the text of the Quran, okay, into the Qurayshi dialect, Qurayshi dialect, which was the dialect of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Uthman commanded Zayd bin Thabit again with 3 other companions, okay, who were all Qurayshi. Zayd bin Thabit was not Qurayshi, he was from Medina, but he was a scribe of the Prophet, and he had memorized the Quran directly from the Prophet. So for that reason, and because he had made the first collection, he had collected the first copy of the Quran, he was given the same task for the second time for a different purpose. This time it was the standardization of the spellings and the exact text which would be read in physical copies by the future generations. So wallahi, we cannot thank Uthman radiallahu anh enough. We cannot thank him enough. We cannot thank these companions of the Prophet ﷺ enough for doing this giant task, for them to standardize the very spellings of the very words of the Quran. Every single word was diligently spelt according to the instructions of the the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. So what we have today is as form in the Quran, in this modern copy, is exactly what we read from the 1st century copy, and is exactly what the definition of the Quran tells us, that the Quran is the Arabic speech of Allah, which he revealed to Muhammad in wording and meaning, and which has been preserved in the Masahif or Mushafs, and has reached us by mutawatir transmission. So not only physical copies we have the oral transmission, or the oral transmission, the reading of the Quran preserved for us. So this scholar is basically saying the Muslim tradition about the preservation of the Quran, in light of the physical evidence, the empirical evidence we have of the copies of the Quran from the 1st century, is accurate.
Yes,
there are no reasons to question it. Okay, those Orientalists and those polemicists and those Islam haters and those missionaries who try to, drill holes into the narrative, they are simply misguided, they are confused, or they are malicious. They are outrightly malicious. This is what this scholar is saying. So why don't we actually read some of these opinions of these scholars.
Inshallah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
as we get to them, I think something I want to really emphasize, one of the things I found very interesting about what he said, the professor, was if the Muslims wanted to make up their history, then they would have made up what you would consider a perfect history. The Quran sent down to the Prophet and he preserves it, right?
Yes.
But we don't see that. What we see instead is a very detailed account of how it happened, and there were these different steps along the way. There would be no reason to make up such a history if you were going to make something up, right?
Absolutely.
And that's
why would you? Why would you?
Yeah.
Why? No, listen.
Yeah.
Why would you? We have physical copies that correlate directly with our modern copies. Why would you? What's the purpose? What's the benefit? The Quran is one uniform text that was standardized by the direct recipients of the Quran from the Prophet himself. I repeat that statement again. The Quran today and the Quran in the first century, okay, is a uniform text, okay, and this text was standardized by the direct recipients of the Quran from the Prophet himself, the companions, the disciples of the Prophet. So when Christian missionaries talk about the preservation of the Quran, they have no legs to stand on. You know, they are the last people to talk about the Quran and its preservation. Why? Because what they have in the New Testament, okay, when you study the history of the New Testament, okay, the earliest copies come from a century after the disappearance of Jesus Christ. The earliest copies that are little tiny weeny fragments as big as a credit card, this big, okay, P53 or P52 or something, I don't know what it's called, the Gospel of John. There's a tiny fragment which comes from the 2nd century CE, okay, potentially more than a century after the disappearance of Jesus Christ, right? And then they are talking about the preservation of the Quran, subhanallah, and none of their copies, none of their Greek copies are exactly the same as the modern text we find in Nestle and Aland, a reconstruction of the text of the New Testament. Okay. Okay, so they have tried to reconstruct the text of the New Testament from the 1st century. None of those manuscripts correlate directly, word by word, like the Quran did. You know, when we read from the 1st century copy of the Quran and from the modern copy, it correlates directly. There is direct correlation. Okay. None of the biblical manuscripts correlate like that with the modern reconstructions of the text of the New Testament.
Absolutely, and it's important to point out that we're not talking about a small fragment the size of a credit card. We're talking the correlation here is not only words, it's ayat, it's the surahs. There's a lot there in that fragment that we covered earlier that you read through. It's giving us a lot of information. It's showing us that the order of the surahs was already there. It's showing us that the ayat, where they start and where they stop, was already determined. It's showing us, that the words are exactly the same as they were. So it's giving us a lot more information, and it will be like comparing apples and oranges if between the preservation of the Bible and the Quran from that perspective.
Absolutely. And amazingly, Quran was so public within the 1st century, within the life of the Prophet ﷺ, that it was even put on coins. Okay, Quran was put on coins. The coins that were being used daily by people in the Muslim world, okay, the Quran was on dirhams and dinars, okay, and some of them examples, I can show you physical examples if I can quickly find one.
An avid coin collector, mashallah.
Yes, I am also a numismatist, and coin collection is one of my passions. So I can find
numismatist. How do you say that?
Numismatist.
Numismatist. Is that the?
The field is numismatics. Okay. Here we go. I just I have a bag of coins here. Okay. There are coins. I have a bag of coins. I just found one. Just looking randomly. Okay. And I have earlier examples. This particular dirham. It is a dirham. Okay. Okay. Can you see it? I hope it zooms in.
Bring it right in front of your face, bro, so it focuses on the coin. Keep it in one place. Go straight. Yeah, keep it. Bring it in front of your face. Stay there. Stay there. Stay there. Stay there. It should pick it up in a second. No, it's not focusing. It's not focusing.
Okay, let me try it. Okay, let me take it to the camera. Okay.
No, it's not focusing.
It's not focusing. Okay. I will read the coin for you. It's an original coin, a silver dirham, okay, from the lives of the companions. Okay. When the companions of Prophet Muhammad were alive. Okay. I know at least one who was alive, definitely. One. Okay. Why? Let me read the coin. In the middle, it says, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. In the middle. Here in the middle, it says that. Okay. Then anti-clockwise, it is written, the text is written anti-clockwise in a circle around La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. It reads, Bismillah, duriba hadha dirham biwasit. In the name of Allah, this dirham was struck in Wasit, which was a city in Iraq. Sana, in the year, Khamsa wa miya, 105 Hijri. Okay. The other side of the coin, we have Surah Ikhlas.
Subhanallah.
Surah Ikhlas, 105 Hijri, Surah Ikhlas written on the coin here, okay, on the dirham. It reads, Allahu Ahad, Allahu Samad, Lam Yalid wa Lam Yulad, in the middle. Then anti-clockwise, another verse from the Quran, okay. Muhammad Rasulullah, Arsalahu bil huda wa din al-haq, liyudhhirahu ala ad-din kulli, walau kariha al-mushrikun. You know which Sahabi was alive at this time when this particular coin was minted in Wasit? Tufail Abu Amir bin Wathila. Okay, Abu Amir Tufail bin Wathila. Abu Amir Tufail bin Wathila was actually alive at the time. He died in 107 Hijri, according to one opinion. According to another opinion, he died in 110 Hijri. 110 Hijri. Tufail Abu Amir Tufail bin Wathila, or Abu Tufail Amir bin Wathila. I might be mixing the name. Okay, so that was the last companion to have died, the last disciple of the Prophet Muhammad to have died, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. This coin was minted within his life. Okay, so there were coins circulating in the Muslim world, okay, as early as 80 Hijri, when Anas bin Malik was alive, when there were other companions alive. Okay. Anas died in 94 Hijri. Okay, and the Quran was public text. It was being circulated on coins, on these Quran parchments. Okay, there is a reason why these parchments have survived after so long, after all those wars and chaos and fires and destruction, the Mongol invasions and the Crusades, and then destruction of Islamic heritage in Spain and Al-Andalus and all of that. Despite all that destruction, these copies have survived because they were in such large numbers. They were found in such large numbers throughout the Muslim world, and that's why they have survived. Mingana actually acquired this particular parchment we read from in the early 20th century in Iraq. He found it in Iraq, if I'm not mistaken, Iraq or Syria. He found this particular parchment in Iraq or Syria with a bookseller or with an antique dealer or something. Lord Cadbury, the founder of Cadbury Chocolates, he had sent Mingana to go and collect Islamic manuscripts, and Mingana came back with these manuscripts, and there is the collection in Birmingham University. You can find it there. So coming back to the scholarly quotes, let's see what the scholars, Western scholars, Orientalists, even those who do not necessarily sympathize with Islam, they have no agenda to sympathize with Islam, what they have to say about the preservation of the Quran. We want to, do this video to nail this topic once and for all.
Yeah.
Okay. Nail the intellectual coffin of the missionaries and the Islam haters and the polemicists and Islamophobes. Nail the intellectual coffin once and for all. This is what we're trying to do in this video, so that they can't come back and open their mouths again and again, start talking about the preservation of the Quran. How is the Quran preserved? Where is the copy of the Quran? Where are the early copies? Are they the same as what you read today? And all these questions, inshallah, this video hopefully will deal with it once and for all. Inshallah.
Okay. That's
I've showed you a coin.
Yeah, sorry. That's what we're gonna go on. So we're already at the hour mark, bro. But I think because it's so extensive and detailed, I don't think time's a factor. It's a resource. Inshallah, it will be a resource. So we'll continue and take as long as it takes to get through all of this material, inshallah.
Yes, absolutely. So summarize it. There were ahruf. Okay, there were 7 different modes of reading the Quran before Uthman's committee standardized the text of the Quran and then presented those copies to posterity. A lot of missionaries, they talk about Uthman burning the Quran, for example. Okay, Uthman did not burn the Quran. Okay, these people, wallahi, sometimes when I think about them, yeah, why do they lie to their audiences? Why do they deceive them? You know, they have basically what they do is, oh, Quran was burnt, Quran was burnt, Quran was burnt. We just read from a 1st century copy of the Quran, did we or not?
Yep.
Did we or not?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And this is
How was
one
the
of
Quran
many
burnt?
doctrines. This is one of
And
many.
what is the Quran? What is the Quran? The Quran is what the companions of the Prophet, his disciples, his direct students, what they took from the Prophet himself. That's the Quran. And what they gave to us. We cannot know what the Quran is without the companions, can we?
No.
Brother Imran, can we know what the Quran is without the companions? So we have to trust the companions.
Absolutely.
And we have no reasons to doubt their veracity. Because they went through such lengths. They went through such difficulties. Okay. You know, when I say difficulties, they have worked hard to even discuss words, letters, how to spell a word, a certain word. We have reports from Uthman bin Affan radiallahu an, when the committee was standardizing the text of the Quran. Okay, he sent one of his servants to tell the scribes to spell certain words in certain way. Okay, words, not sentences. We're not talking about chapters, words. Go and tell the scribe to spell this particular word in that surah, in that verse, in this way. This is how Uthman himself was personally involved in, you know, making sure, supervising the committee. Okay, and who is Uthman? One of the earliest Muslims who accepted Islam, who took the Quran directly from the Prophet. The man died reading the Quran from a copy of the Quran. The reports we have about Uthman bin Affan radiallahu an, the circumstances around his death, when he was killed in his home, when he was assassinated. Okay, you know what he was doing, Brother Imran? Reading the Quran. He was reading from the copy of the Quran. And Imam Ibn Kathir narrates that his blood fell on the verses of Surah Baqarah. And what were those verses? فَسَيَكْفِيكُهُمُ اللَّهُ فَسَيَكْفِيكُهُمُ اللَّهُ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْبَصِيرُ. Okay, if I'm not mistaken about the verse. Okay, this was the verse. The blood of Uthman radiallahu anh fell on these verses. Okay, so all of these reports put together, wallahi, only a liar, a malicious Islamophobe, or someone who is genuinely confused about the preservation of the Quran would question the preservation. Okay, and all of these things. And what follows now, when we read from the scholarly opinions, okay, so the Quran is exactly what the companions of the Prophet gave to us. The copies, when Uthman said burn the copies, what was he talking about? He was talking about all the non-standardized copies people had written in their own spellings for their own convenience. The purpose of the first collection under Abu Bakr was to collect the information, what they called the Quran. Is that clear? To collect the information, what they called the Quran. It was collected, not standardized in spellings, okay, or in writing, not standardized. It was collected. The second collection was, the purpose of that second collection was standardization of the text. And they did it for a reason, because people were reading it differently. People were pronouncing it differently, right? Because they had written certain things in the copies, right? Different to other copies.
And this was leading to disagreements and
this was leading to disagreements and disputes and arguments. That's why Hudayfa bin Yaman, he came back from Azerbaijan, according to the report of Bukhari. He said to Uthman, before we end up like the Jews and Christians, Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, oh the leader of the believers, before we end up like the Jews and the Christians, disputing about the scripture, disputing about the word of God, we need to standardize it. We are the authorities. We know exactly what the Quran is. We took it directly from the Prophet. We must now standardize it for posterity, for the future generation, so that there is no confusion and dispute. Allahu Akbar. This is beautiful. This was the best thing that happened in the history of Islam. This compilation this standardization, this recension of Uthman radiallahu an was the best thing that happened, in the history of Islam. And the result was the copy we read on the screen. The result was the copy we read on the screen. Okay, so the previous content of the Quran, okay, whatever the form was previously, the ulama have differed about the exact nature of the text before the standardization of the text before by Uthman. Before that standardization, the nature, the exact nature, the ulama have disputed. The ulama have, for example, the scholars of Islam, they have different opinions as to the exact nature of those differences. They said these differences basically were the spellings of the words.
Here we're referring to the ahruf that the Quran came down.
The ahruf, the modes, those 7 modes. What were they exactly, and what was the nature of those? Okay, because the Muslims got rid of their old copies voluntarily. They were not forced on gunpoint or sword point to get rid of these, just like the Christian missionaries claim that there was an army of soldiers going around the Muslim world forcing people to abandon their Qurans. Uthman simply advised them that those old copies you had written for your conveniences, just get rid of them. Those of you who have them in parchments, wash your parchments and write the new standardized text. And those who cannot wash, just burn those copies and use the copies we have standardized, so there is no so that there is no confusion about the exact text of the Quran. This is the Quran. This is what we took from the Prophet. So read from these copies. That's the spellings and the exact content has been standardized, and we are the authorities who took the Quran directly from the Prophet. We know better what it is. So those copies were given. So the scholars differed about the exact nature of the text before that standardization of Uthman. Okay, and how that that particular that particular reality of the text affected the later reading of the Quran. Okay, how it affected the qira'at, how the Quran is read, for example, in Hafs, Warsh, Qalun, Duri, Ibn Kathir, okay, and all of these different readings of the Quran. The text is exactly the same. What we read on the screen, the text is physically exactly the same. How it is read is where there are certain variations. How it is read. The text is there physically in front of your eyes from the 1st century on the screen. Can you put it again, Brother Imran? Do you have the window open?
Yeah, I'll pop it up again while you're talking, inshallah.
Okay, the text is exactly the same. How it is read, okay, and there are slight variations in how this particular text you can see on the screen. How it is read is basically, what you find in the Qur'an, the 10 different ways of reading this very text you can see on the screen.
So let's
and the variations are very, very slight. The variations, for example, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Maliki Yawmiddin. So in Hafs, you would read Maliki Yawmiddin. Okay, in Warsh, you would read Maliki Yawmiddin. So the text is exactly the same. When you would read Malik and Malik written, it would be, exactly the same. It depends on if you pronounce Alif or you do not pronounce Alif. Okay, it depends. Okay, it doesn't have any bearing on the text you can see on the screen, and people try to make a big deal out of it, basically, right?
So what you're saying, just to quickly, so I get this right and I understand this, bro, before we move on, you're saying that the Quran comes down to the Prophet ﷺ, and it's also revealed in 7 ahruf, right? Now, that is done, whatever it is, we've discussed that to whatever extent we can, but that is done to facilitate for the ease of people understanding the message of Allah, right?
Yes.
Anything to facilitate the message getting to people. Then at a particular point in our history, there comes a point where there's disagreements now because of these differences, right? So then it's standardized in a way where the text is standardized.
Those words, those 7 modes were revealed by Allah directly. To accommodate the Arabs, to accommodate ease for the Arabs. Those 7 modes, okay, whether they were variations in dialects, whether those are variations in pronouncing of certain words, whether those are variations in order, the order of a particular verse, okay,
Yep.
the order of words, whether the
Mhm.
word comes after or before, okay, whether those were variations in plural and singular, okay, these kind of variations,
Mhm.
these slight variations were directly revealed by Allah in 7 different modes, okay.
Mhm.
So as I said, that the exact nature of those variations, okay, the ulama, the scholars have debated, but what we do know, that the Quran that was standardized by Uthman radiallahu an, exactly how the Prophet taught it to the companions in the Qurayshi dialect, is exactly what you see on the screen there.
Yes, yes.
That's
And
the Quran of the Prophet.
yes.
Every single word of it, what you see on the screen, came directly from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam via his companions,
Mhm.
who had put it down for us.
Yep.
And this is what we read today. This is
And
exactly what we read today.
it's
And
from
it
the
can be
text.
found in its entirety in
Yep.
the first century copies.
Subhanallah.
And you can
And
confirm that in the link from islamicawareness.org.
absolutely. And it's this text from which you can still read all of the authentic qira'at from as well. That's what we're saying,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And because there's no dialectical markings on this particular text, as there wasn't at that point, but now
Yeah.
when we have, for example, Hafs, and
Yes.
we read Warsh, it has those particular dialectical markings for a particular reading, which is
Yes.
authentic. That's what we're saying at this point.
Yes, it could be that. Yes. Or yes, the marking can accommodate the qira'at. Okay.
Mhm.
But they are reading this.
Yep.
They are reading this text you saw on
Yes.
the screen.
Yep.
Hafs is reading this.
Warsh.
Warsh is reading
Yes.
this. Qalun is reading this. Duri is reading this. Ibn Kathir is reading this. Is that
Fine.
clear? So the qira'at are not different versions of the Quran. They are the same Quran, okay, but they are reading. And there are the very slight variations, for example, where they do occur, they
Yep.
actually originate in the ahruf. They originate from the ahruf. And this is one of the opinions of the ulama, okay? But this is what they are reading.
Mhm.
This is what they are reading, okay?
Fine.
So this is the point people need to understand, and they need to be very sure about. What they need to understand is simply is that what they see on the screen, okay, is exactly what the Prophet taught to his companions, and exactly what they delivered to us, and is exactly what we find here.
Yes.
Period. Full stop. Period. Full stop. Okay.
Mhm.
There is not another book from antiquity. There's not a book from human history, from antiquity, that has been preserved like the Quran.
Subhanallah.
That has been
To be
preserved like the
honest,
Quran.
the
So now we
different
quickly
qira'at-
move on to the scholarly quotes.
Yeah,
Okay.
and
So
to
that,
be honest, the different qira'at, Adnan, by would you say that, and from my perspective at least, it adds to the miracle of the Quran that it is an oral tradition, bro, but it's been revealed in all of these different modes, and they are preserved, and we have them today. That
look,
it blows your mind.
it's a miracle. It's a miracle in the sense that not only is written down, okay, completely in the physical form from the very time of the Prophet himself, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but even the reading of it is preserved to the minutest detail. To the minutest detail. Not only that it is written down in physical copies in the physical way, but even how to read those words has been preserved to the minutest details. If this is not preservation, if this is not a miracle of preservation, then I don't know what is. I don't know what is. Okay. People who try to make Malik and Malik different are either mentally retarded, they don't know how the Arabic language works, or they are malicious liars, basically. They deliberately try to confuse their masses, Christian missionaries and Islamophobes and all those people. Look, I would like to put their soul to rest. Okay. Keep trying, keep going. Okay. You will never succeed because the pens have been lifted, papers are dry. We have the physical copies from the first century, from the life of the Prophet ﷺ. They are exactly the same as this, what we read in our homes. Okay. So keep crying, keep crying, keep crying. Quran is not going to change. The Quran is not corrupt like the Bible. And those atheistic Islamophobes out there, you cannot confuse the Muslims about the history. Servants like us, you know, people who are humble students of Islam, they will continue to come and they will continue to clarify the picture for the Muslims and non-Muslims, inshallah. So I want to now quickly move on to scholarly quotes about the preservation of the Quran. Okay. Very quickly moving on to Richard Bell and Montgomery Watt, who had written a book titled Introduction to the Quran. Introduction to the Quran. It was first published in 1970. Okay, and the quotes we will go through are basically in a chronological order: 1970, then 2006, then 2019, and then 2020. We will see the consistent opinions of scholars, Western non-Muslim scholars who have read the Quran. Okay, we will see their opinions consistently, what they have to say. Number one, Richard Bell and Montgomery Watt, what do they have to say on page 44 of their book, Introduction to the Quran, published in 1970 by the Edinburgh University Press? And it goes as follows, page 44. This establishment of the text of the Quran under Uthman may be dated somewhere between 650 and his death in 656. It is the cardinal point in what may be called the formation of the canon of the Quran. Whatever may have been the form of the Quran previously, it is certain that the book still in our hands is essentially the Uthmanic Quran. Uthman's commission decided what was to be included and what excluded. It fixed the number and order of the surahs and the outline of the consonantal text, that is, its shape when the dots distinguishing letters are omitted. If we remember that to preserve every smallest fragment of genuine revelation was an ineluctable requirement, the commission under Zayd must be adjudged to have achieved a wonderful piece of work. Okay, page 46, they continue. Thus, on the whole, the information which has reached us about the pre-Uthmanic codices suggests that there was no great variation in the actual contents of the Quran in the period immediately after the Prophet's death. So they're talking about difference between the ahruf, reality of the Quran, those 7 modes, and what was put down by the committee of Uthman, what we can see on the screen. Okay, earlier what we saw on the screen, the actual physical copy from the life of the Prophet and his companions. Okay, so what they are saying is this: thus, on the whole, the information which has reached us about the pre-Uthmanic codices suggests that there was no great variation in the actual contents of the Quran in the period immediately after the Prophet's death. The order of the surahs was apparently not fixed, and there were many slight variations, okay, in reading, but of other differences there is no evidence. Page 46. Okay, page 51, they continue, Richard Bell and Montgomery Watt. On general grounds, then, it may be concluded that the Uthmanic revision was honestly carried out and reproduced as closely as was possible to the men in charge of it, what Muhammad had delivered. Allahu Akbar. So Richard Bell and Montgomery Watt in 1970, they are saying what Muhammad delivered was honestly, diligently, credibly passed on by Uthman and his committee to posterity. Non-Muslims, Orientalists, okay, scholars of the Quran. Then they continue on page 51 again. Modern study of the Quran has not, in fact, raised any serious question of its authenticity. The style varies, but is almost unmistakable. So clearly does the whole bear the stamp of uniformity that doubts of its genuineness hardly arise. The authenticity of a few verses has indeed been questioned. Okay, that's what they're saying here. Okay, so they're saying in general, the picture of the Quran. This is a non-Muslim talking, by the way. This is not an imam from a mosque talking. This is not a reciter of the Quran from the mosque of the Prophet in Medina talking. This is not the reciter of the Quran from Mecca talking. This is not a scholar from Al-Azhar talking. This is not a scholar from Medina University talking. This is Montgomery Watt and Richard Bell talking. Next quote from a German scholar of the Quran, Angelica Neuwirth. I hope I pronounced her name correctly. Angelica Neuwirth, 2006, in her article titled Structural, Linguistic and Literary Features of the Quran, And this article was published in the Cambridge Companion to the Quran in 2006. And page number is 100 and 101. 100 and 101. And Angelica Newworth states, as a whole, however, the theories of the so-called skeptic or revisionist scholars who arguing historically make a radical break with the transmitted picture of Islamic origins, shifting them in both time and place from the 7th to the 8th or 9th century and from the Arabian Peninsula to the Fertile Crescent, have now been discarded. Though many of their critical observations remain challenging and still call for investigation, new findings of Quranic text fragments, moreover, can be adduced to affirm rather than call into question the traditional picture of the Quran as an early fixed text composed of the surahs we have. Angelica Newworth, another Orientalist, if you want to call her that, I don't know if you would agree with that. Okay, a non-Muslim German scholar is saying that the traditional view, the traditional narrative of the preservation of the Quran as an early uniform text is accurate. This is exactly what she's saying. Okay, then there is another opinion from another scholar. I will very quickly read from it. Okay, before, let me get the quote out very quickly. I hope you have the quote with you, Brother Imran.
It's by Marijn van Putten, I think.
Marine, I think it would be, yeah, Marijn van Putten.
Yes.
Okay, Marijn van Putten, who published an article in 2019, and it can be found in the Cambridge University website. And the title of the article is The Grace of God. The Grace of God as Evidence for a Written Uthmanic Archetype, the Importance of Shared Orthographic Idiosyncrasies. Okay, and in the conclusion of this article, he states, this paper has shown that idiosyncratic spellings of certain words are not due to the whims of the scribe, but are reproduced with the same spelling in all early Quranic manuscripts. The only way that such a consistent reproduction can be explained is by assuming that all the documents that belong to the Uthmanic text type go back to a single written archetype whose spelling was strictly copied from one copy to the next, showing that these copies were based on a written exemplar. The manuscripts examined in this study are sufficiently early that a codification of the Uthmanic text type is perfectly consistent with an attribution to its traditional source, Uthman bin Affan. In other words, Marijn van Putten is saying what we find today in physical copies from the 1st century of Islam, like the one we saw on the screen, right? Birmingham Quran, okay, is exactly what Uthman had given basically to the Muslims. Okay, it's okay. In other words, it is from the Prophet. If it is from Uthman, then it is from the Prophet. Okay, we trust Uthman, Zayd bin Thabit, Abdullah bin Zubair, okay, and all the other companions who took the Quran directly from the Prophet and gave it to us in a consensus. They made a consensus on this text of the Quran. Nikolai Sinai is another modern scholar of the Quran. In 2020, he published an article in the Journal of the American Oriental Society. Okay, and his article is titled Beyond the Cairo Edition on the Study of Early Quranic Codices, page 189 and 190. He states, there is thus a peculiar disjuncture between the version of the Quranic text that remains the basis of academic work on the one hand, and the physical evidence for the Quran's written transmission, particularly its early transmission, on the other. This disjuncture is sustained by the near total dominance of the above mentioned standard recension of the Quran's consonantal skeleton. Consonantal skeleton basically means what we read on the page, what we read on the screen on that 1st century copy. You know, the structure of the words, the morphology, the skeleton of the words. This is exactly what it means by consonantal skeleton. The so-called Uthmanic text Okay, he's saying basically the so-called Osmanic text. A student of the Quran who takes the trouble to check early codices will generally encounter a more or less undotted and unvocalized version of the same consonantal skeleton that underlies her modern print copy, often with some orthographic variation. Okay, whether or not medial R is spelled okay, plain, i.e. with alif, and minor textual discrepancies such as the presence or absence of particles like wa. Okay, this supremacy of the Quran's canonical rasam, which must have arisen early, is apt to douse some of the interest that scholars who are not card-carrying codicologists, paleographers, or art historians will take in manuscript of the Quran. To be sure, one may well hold that the gamut of viable hypotheses about the date of the Quran has now shrunk to the 7th century, thereby diffusing some of the issues long standing. This was a difficult quote for most people to understand because it's highly academic in its language by Nikolai Sinai. In other words, basically what he's saying is the Quranic text today in the ancient copies we see, okay, definitely, whether you study it paleographically, or whether you apply other academic models, it goes back to the 7th century within the life of the Prophet and his companions, and it is uniform. Okay, the variations in scribal tradition are very, very minor. For example, certain letters might be missing, alphabets. Certain alphabets might be, for example, in a certain place, one alif, okay, for example, the equivalent of A, okay, or the equivalent of W, wa, okay, is maybe missing in certain copies, but the text is uniform. The text is absolutely uniform. So, to put the long story short, this has been a long video, okay, but it has been a must video, very, very important to deal with all these Islamophobes and malicious propagandists out there once and for all. And we want the Muslims to share this video everywhere with every non-Muslim who questions the veracity of the Quran and the Quranic text, so that they can look at it. They can look at the traditional view on Islam's, the Quran's preservation. They can look at the traditional view on how the Quran was transmitted. They can also look at the scholarly views as to how the Quran was preserved. Finally, we want to play this clip from Dr. Yasir Qadi, who said something, and Christian missionaries are using it as some kind of symbol of their victory, in the campaign against the Quran. So let's play the clip and see what he has to say and explain what he has.
Yeah, while I bring it up, it's important to know that this is not something new that the Christian missionaries are doing. If you go back centuries, right, when they started first translating the Quran into English, most of the early translations, and correct me if I'm wrong, Adnan, were missionary translations with a particular agenda. And when people read them, this is why I didn't, when you look at the Enlightenment period, there was a lot of Enlightenment thinkers who read those translations and got the wrong end of the stick. But what's interesting, I was reading recently, Voltaire, originally when he came across the Islamic tradition, obviously based on the missionary translations, etc., he really disliked Islam. And he even made plays, anti-Islamic plays against the Prophet ﷺ. But later in his life, several decades later, when he came across a decent translation I think it was by Sales, he actually changed his whole view on Islam, and he started defending Islam, bro. And that shows that this missionary attack on Islam is nothing new. It's been there for a very long time.
It started from the very early period of Islam. Okay, yeah. Christian missionaries, clergy, they started to lie on Islam, literally lie. It starts with John of Damascus. Okay, John of Damascus was one of the later church fathers who wrote in Greek. Okay, he was from Damascus. He was alive during the Umayyad period, and it starts with him. And the tradition continues to this way. I will make a very responsible statement now. Most Christian missionaries commenting on Islam, most of them, not all, most of them are malicious liars, are a bunch of liars. I'm usually very careful with my statements, and I'm making this statement with confidence. They are a bunch of liars. they deliberately ignore physical evidence, empirical evidence, which is in their faces, to confuse their own masses, to take them away from Islam. They basically want to confuse the Christians into thinking Quran is not preserved, Islam is messed up, Prophet Muhammad is immoral. They will keep lying. They will keep lying. They will lie to an extent that they will lose any sense of shame. Not that they ever had it in the first place, right? But they are most of them, they are outright liars. They are liars. Okay, they're not confused. They're not ignorant. They know the truth. They know they are lying. This is why they are malicious liars. Without saying names, without mentioning names. That's why we choose not to engage with most of them. Because they, how will you debate a liar? How will you debate a liar? When you put physical evidence in front of their face, they will say, "Oh, I don't accept it. It doesn't exist." Okay. If you tell someone there's the sun, can you see the sun? He will say, "I cannot see the sun." He will do this, literally. Okay, the sun is there, and we're going to be grabbing his head. We're going to be grabbing his head and pointing to the sun. Look, the sun is there. Look, the sun is there. He's going to be doing. I cannot see the sun. Where's the sun? I cannot. This is how Christian missionaries are.
They shouldn't be.
Literally, this is exactly how they are.
They shouldn't be a resource. They shouldn't be a resource for Muslims or non-Muslims, right? Without, just to name, I don't want to name drop, but there's some individuals that are online and that are deliberately jumping on any opportunity they get, bro. Literally any opportunity. They're clutching at straws just to make a case against Islam, bro. They're the last people you want to go to as.
You know why they have to do it? Because their own scripture is entirely corrupt. Okay, when I say entirely corrupt, from page 1 to the page last, they don't have what the authors actually wrote. Here we have the Quran from the 1st century, okay, where we read word by word exactly what the Prophet taught his companions and what they transmitted to us in our modern copies. It has reached us in our modern copies. And then on top of that, Western scholars, Western non-Muslim scholars are saying Muslims have exactly the same Quran Muhammad taught to his companions, and then they delivered it to posterity. What more do you need? Physical copies, then a tradition to back it, how to read it, and then modern Christian, non-Christian, non-Muslim scholars confirming its veracity. Then anyone who questions it after that is either confused or a liar. So let's go to the clip of Dr. Yasir Qadhi.
This is why people like David would need to fix up, bro, honestly. And I just had to say that some people are just clowns, bro. Honestly, literally clowns.
We don't engage with people like that because they are outright liars. I'm not talking about Dr. Yasir Qadhi, by the way. He mentioned, Brother Imran mentioned a name. So in case people think that the picture came up and I'm talking about him.
No, that was no time.
Dr. Yasir Qadhi, I think he should have been more clear on this issue. He confused a lot of people with some vague statements he made. Either he should not have indulged in this topic in this particular interview. If he chose to indulge, then he should have gone into more details, clarifying the muhkamat. The muhkamat means established matters, what we talked about in this particular live stream. We talked about established matters in this live stream, right? We talked about them. What is established? This is what's established. So if you were to ask me, if you gave me a blank codex, a blank copy, for example, a blank notebook. If you gave me a blank notebook and asked me to write the Quran in it, what would I write in it? If you ask me that question, I would tell you, I would write this. Bring it back on the screen.
What, the video?
No, the page. The page.
1 second, bro. Let me just pop it up. Here we go.
If you ask me this question today, what would you write on a blank notebook if we were asked to write the Quran on that blank notebook? I would write exactly this.
This
would write this.
This is what was given. This was what came.
And why I would write that? Because this is exactly what's here. From page 1 to the page last. So if you go to islamicawareness.org, there is a list of Qurans from the 1st century. We have the entirety of the Quran. The entirety of the Quran from the 1st century. The entire Quran, we have it from the 1st century. Okay, in different libraries, Okay, we even have complete copies. The Husseini Mosque manuscript, which is from the 1st century in Cairo. Okay, Husseini Mosque manuscript is from the 1st century of Islam. It's in Cairo. It is 99% complete. The complete text of the Quran. Only first 2 or 3 pages are missing. Surah Al-Fatiha and maybe the very early verses of Surah Baqarah are missing. The rest of the Quran is there. Husseini Mosque manuscript. Allahu Akbar. So if someone asks me what would you write on a blank copy, a blank notebook, if you were asked to write the Quran, I would write exactly that manuscript,
and that
which is exactly the same as what we read at home today. So why are Christian missionaries going on a victory parade? Let's see what Yasir Qadhi said and what he was talking about.
Okay, 1 second.
The crisis was very simple. Traditional understandings of Ahruf al-Qira'at cannot answer some of these pressing questions that are now being poked by our people outside of, by our academics, by their academics outside of the faith tradition.
Pause, please.
Yep, done.
Here, Dr. Yasir Qadhi is saying that the traditional narrative about Ahruf and their relationship to the Qira'at. Ahruf, those 7 modes of the Quran that were read, okay, in the fluid form before the Uthmanic standardization, their reality, those modes and their reality, and how it affects the later reading of the Quran. He's not talking about the physical copies of the Quran. Let me repeat that. Dr. Yasir Qadhi is not talking about the physical copies of the Quran from the 1st century. He's talking about the reading. He's talking about the relationship of the actual reality of those 7 modes of the Quran, how they were read then, and how the Quran was read post-Uthmanic recension, okay, and their relationship. This is what he's talking about, that Western academics are raising questions about it, okay, and they're not getting answers, okay. Just because they're not getting answers does not mean the Quran is not preserved. The Quran is preserved. As we showed you the text, the physical copy from the life of the Prophet and his companions. The Quran is there, the text is there. The debate is about how it is read in those 10 qira'at and how those 10 qira'at relate to the readings of the Quran before the standardization of Uthman. Is that clear? This is exactly what Dr. Yasir Qadhi is talking about. And I wish he could have clarified more. If he had to mention it, if he had to talk about it, he should have gone into more detail to clarify his position. Okay, and I hope he can come out and clarify his position in more detail. Otherwise, he leaves people confused about his position. People will attack him, Muslims and non-Muslims. Non-Muslims will use his vague, ambiguous statements because he's not clearly explaining what he's talking about. I know what he's talking about. I understand what he's talking about. But the masses out there, the Muslims and non-Muslims, do not understand what he's talking about. He needs to come out and he needs to clarify as to what he was talking about, okay? Because missionaries and Islamophobes and Islam haters are using his statements to claim that the Quran is not preserved. Look, a scholar of Islam is saying this. Look, this scholar has written a book on the Quran and he's confused about the Quran. He's not confused. He stated clearly that the Quran, as in the physical copies, is exactly what we read today from the 1st century, right? He's talking about the qira'at, the pronunciation, the reading, the oral delivery of the Quran, how it relates to the pre-Uthmanic reality of the text.
Right.
This is what he's talking about. This is a very academic question which academics are discussing. He's talking about that. Okay. And he doesn't need to indulge in this. I would advise Dr. Yasir Qadhi to stop indulging in this because this is not his field. He's not an authority to say. I mean, when he wrote his book, Introduction to the Quranic Sciences, he was a graduate student from Medina University. Okay, he was in his early 20s. He was a student. Okay, I don't know what his exact qualification in the Quran is. What he needs to do, he needs to delegate this task to the Ahlul Quran. He needs to delegate the task to the Ahlul Quran, to the Qur'an, to the masters of the Quran, people who have done PhDs in the Qira'at, and they have mastered the transmission of the Quran. He needs to delegate to them, right? Instead of taking it upon himself, talking about the Qira'at and Ahruf and how they correlate and how they relate to each other. Okay, this is my opinion. This is my advice to him as a brother. Okay, I would advise him to avoid making statements that are vague. If you have to make statements, then do lengthy programs like the one we did today and explain your position so people are not left in doubt, because there are people out there, they make all sorts of things, okay, from statements. So it was very unwise, I would say, of Brother Muhammad Hijab and Dr. Qadi to discuss this in such a brief way and move on. Okay, they should not, leave people confused. They must make things clear. Let's go back to the.
So let me ask you, I want to get clarity here. So so you're saying that the point that was made, it was about discussion about how the ahruf relate to the qira'at that we have.
Yes.
But when it comes
not about the text.
Yes.
The text of the Quran is there from the 1st century.
Yeah.
We just read it. We read it today.
So Adnan, tell me one thing. When it comes to, because I think this was mentioned, when it comes to the reading Hafs or Warsh, when we read Hafs and Warsh, this is what was given to us by the Prophet ﷺ.
You are reading Hafs and Warsh from the same mushaf, from the same text. As I explained, Hafs, Warsh, Qalun, Duri, Ibn Kathir, all of these different styles of readings are based upon exactly that text you see on the screen. Exactly that text you see on the screen. Okay, Hafs is not different Quran, Warsh is not different Quran. Okay, Qalun or Duri or other readings are not different Qurans. They are one text being read slightly differently.
And all of those different readings are authentically preserved,
transmitted. All of those pronunciations, all of those variants, all of those slight variants are directly traceable back to the Prophet. And this is where the scholars have this opinion that they actually originate in the ahruf, those 7 modes.
Got you.
So these slight variations of readings of the same text of the Quran, which we saw on the screen from the 1st century, originate in those 7 modes. They originate from those 7 modes. This is one of the opinions. Okay, to clarify, this is one of the opinions. And scholars have many other opinions on the nature of ahruf and their relation to the Qira'at. Okay, and classical scholars have written books on this. Okay, Al-Jazari, for example. There is a book by Imam Al-Jazari. Okay, and there is a book, it's a brief book on this issue, Al-Itqan fi Ulum al-Quran by Imam Suyuti. He discusses these matters. Okay, he gives some of the opinions, and there are many books written by other scholars explaining the nature of ahruf and the Qira'at. Okay, and their relationship with each other. Okay, so let's play the clip again and see what Dr. Qadi has to say.
Muslim environment, there's always some respect that we have for the Quran. We should. In a Muslim environment, we'll press a little bit and then we'll say, okay, khalas, sami'na wa ata'na. And that's great, alhamdulillah. When you go to academia, they don't have that red line. And they're going to
pause that. When Dr. Qadi says that Muslims are pressed a little bit and then they sami'na wa ata'na, I think he made a mistake there. Okay, respectfully, he made a mistake there. Okay, Muslims just don't say sami'na wa ata'na. Muslims have studied our Quran. Our scholars have written books on Qira'at, detailed books on Qira'at. Okay, they have studied this. Imam Al-Jazari, I gave you an example, Imam Al-Jazari. Okay, go and look at his works and see what he has to say on the Qira'at and other scholars. Okay, so it's not just we receive something and we submit to it blindly. No, scholars study. They write lengthy works. They are all available in Arabic. And Orientalists and Western scholars, they are still studying those sciences. And to say the least, I would like to mention this. A lot of these Orientalists actually haven't studied in a lot of depth. Okay, they keep coming up with these new theories. The epistemology of Western scholars, the epistemological lens they use to study Islamic sources is different to the lens we use to study Islamic sources. Our epistemology and the epistemology of Western scholars is not the same. Our epistemology doesn't have to be the same. as the epistemology of Western scholars. Epistemology is basically theory of knowledge. How you get to know things. How you get to know things, in case people don't know what epistemology is, right? So, for example, I'll give you a very quick example. Western scholars, most of them, they doubt the veracity of hadith literature. Do we have to accept it? Do we have to take it from them? Are they our imams? Are they the ones who will decide for us what we can believe and what we can't believe? No, more and more as they study Islamic literature, as they go along, as they are making progress in Islamic studies, they are supporting the traditional narrative of Islam. Even hadith, they are now confirming that hadith, okay, is a viable source of history. While in the 1970s and 80s, some of them were very skeptical. Okay, now that revisionist school is being abandoned by modern scholars. A lot of modern scholars are now actually writing works to support the traditional view of Islam when it comes to even hadith. Now, because Western scholars are raising questions about the veracity of hadith, do we leave our epistemology? Do we leave the works of, for example, all the muhaddithin of the past? Do we leave the books of Ilm al-Rijal? Do we, for example, ditch Imam Albani? Do we ditch Sheikh Albani? Do we ditch Imam al-Dhahabi? Do we abandon Ibn al-Hajar al-Asqalani? Do we abandon Imam Nawawi? Do we abandon Ibn Salah? All of these traditional giants who have written books on the science of hadith, just because some Western scholars cannot get their heads around Muslim epistemology, just because they're highly skeptical, just because they want to doubt everything, even their own birth, right? Do we start abandoning the sources of Islam? No, we defend them with solid evidence, physical and otherwise. And we have, wallahi, we have so much evidence, physical, empirical, okay, and otherwise, to support our sources. Let's go forward, inshallah, with the clip.
The emperor with no clothes. They're going to just point out, no, that doesn't make any sense. Well, that's not true, and this and that. And they'll bring issues, which I'm not going to mention explicitly, that you know are true because they're in your own books. They're not inventing anything new. They'll bring you riwayat, and they'll bring you athar, and then you add to that very well-known issues of, I don't even want to be explicit. Then you bring on top of that makhtutat, and then. And it's very clear to you every single...
Dr. Qadi, if you don't want to be explicit, don't talk about this. If you talk about these things, the Dr. Qadi keeps saying that I don't want to be explicit. I don't want to be explicit. If you don't want to be explicit, don't talk about these matters, because you're confusing people out there. People don't know what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about, okay? But people don't know, the awam, the masses don't know what you're talking about. So my request from Dr. Yasir Qadi is that he needs to come out and needs to clarify more in detail as to what he was talking about exactly for the people to understand, right? And we have done this 2 hours video explaining what we are talking about, and we have done our best to be as clear, as crystal clear as possible about the preservation of the Quran. That's how you need to come out and explain, okay? There's no point of saying that there are reports there are reports. We know exactly what's there. We know exactly what's there, and we know how our scholars have explained all these reports, okay? Just because Western scholars cannot get their heads around these reports, and just because they cannot accept certain reports, okay, you know, Western scholars, they work in a very funny way. What we deem authentic, they will say, no, it doesn't seem authentic. They will leave it. And then they will apply their own self-concocted criteria on Islamic sources, and they will bring something inauthentic from Islamic sources, and they will say, this seems to be authentic, and we will go by that. This is how Western academics work. They don't go by our epistemology. They don't follow our boundaries, our limits of authenticity and inauthenticity of hadith or reports. They concoct their own ideas, their own standards, and they go by their own standards. Now, just because they do that, do we have to agree with them? No. We tell them we don't accept your standards, especially when they clash directly with our solid epistemology, Islamic epistemology. It's Islamic theory of the preservation of the Quran and the hadith. And now, thankfully, as we have read the quotes, a lot of them are coming out and they're confirming the veracity of the Quran and the veracity of the hadith literature. So Yasir Qadi, Dr. Yasir Qadi, respectfully, he is, I think, he needs to come out and clarify more as to what he was talking about when he talks about Western scholarship. Western scholarship is not be all and do all, is it? Okay, Western scholarship has made major mistakes. and they keep changing. For example, very quickly, Joseph Schacht, he wrote a book, The Origins of the Muhammadan Jurisprudence, in the 60s, in the late 60s, I think. He wrote this book, The Origins of Muhammadan Jurisprudence. And in this book, he plagiarized a theory, or he developed the theory of Ignaz Goldziher. Ignaz Goldziher was a 19th century Jewish Orientalist from Austria who had traveled to Egypt. He studied in Al-Azhar with scholars, okay, and later on he came up with his own theory that hadith literature was forged in the name of the Prophet and was projected backwards. So people, to support their ideas later on in the 2nd and 3rd century, they came up with ideas, they came up with doctrines, okay, about Islam, and to support those doctrines, they would forge reports, they would forge information and then project it back to the Prophet. They would attribute it back to the Prophet via a fake chain of narration. This was his theory, which he took from a 19th century hostile Orientalist called Ignaz Goldziher. And then he put this theory forward in a new style, or in a new way, in his book, The Origins of Muhammadan Jurisprudence. You know, when that book came out, a lot of Western scholars in the West, they said, Islam is finished. Islam is finished, it's gone. There is no response to this book. We don't know how Muslims will respond to it. Okay, Islam is debunked. Islamic literature is debunked. The hadith literature is debunked. Islamic jurisprudence is debunked. When this book came out, check this out. Not long after that, one of our scholars who was competent in the English language, Sheikh Muhammad Mustafa Al-Azami, the same man who wrote the history of the Quranic text, okay, he wrote a rebuttal to Schacht, Joseph Schacht. And the rebuttal was titled, On the Origins, on Schacht's. This is the title of Muhammad Al-Azami, Sheikh Mustafa Al-Azami's book. This was the title, On Schacht's Origins of Muhammadan Jurisprudence. In this book, he pulled the rug from Schacht's feet. Wallahi. Yeah. He showed childish mistakes he made in the Arabic language. Basic mistakes in reading the hadith literature and contextualizing it and even understanding the context. And then he showed in this book how erroneous Schacht's theory was. He completely debunked it. And Joseph Schacht became a laughing stock after the refutation of Sheikh Muhammad Mustafa Al-Azami. This is the reality of many Western scholars. Many Western, I'm not saying all of them. Okay, they go and read certain books superficially. You know, PhDs are very narrow. PhDs do not give you a wide scope. They do not give you wide knowledge of, for example, even the science of hadith. It's a vast science. PhD doctors trained from Western institutions, they are nothing in comparison to our muhaddithin. I repeat, PhD doctors, even in the science of hadith, trained in Western institutions. Why am I saying this? Because their studies are very narrow on a certain point. They only study a very narrow certain point, right? Muhaddithin, they memorize chunky volumes. They memorize names. They memorize histories of men narrating reports. They know inside out the history of the hadith literature and how it was preserved and how it was transmitted. Okay, PhD doctors, in comparison to our muhaddithin, are nothing. Nothing. Okay, so that's why when Dr. Yasir Qadhi is giving too much credence to Western scholarship and Western scholars and the questions they're raising, okay, you know, I don't accept that. I'm sorry to say this. I had to talk about it. Let's move on.
Okay. So Adnan, just to make you aware, we're closing in on, we're over 2 hours now. So inshallah.
Yeah, we're gonna finish very soon.
That's fine. Inshallah. I just wanted to point just to remind you, inshallah, but take your time.
Yeah.
Very advanced student and specialist, that the standard narrative has holes in it. That's what I'm going to say. The standard narrative does not answer some very pressing questions. These are now within the Western.
Here, Dr. Yasir Qadhi is talking about Western academics saying that the standard narrative, okay, on the relationship between ahruf and the qira'at has holes in it. Okay, he's talking about Western scholarship. He's not talking about Muslim scholars. We have enough information to understand and to know what the Quran is. We have enough information on the qira'at and their transmission. We have enough information to know that ahruf were variations before the standardization of Uthman. Ahruf, they were variant readings of the Quran. There were different modes of the reading of the Quran before the Uthmanic standardization. Okay, and then Uthman standardized the text into the Qurayshi dialect for the future generations to read it. Okay, we have enough information to know that. So what Dr. Yasir Qadhi is talking about, as I understand him, I hope I understand him correctly, that he's saying, Western scholars are saying, there are holes in the standard Islamic narrative about, you know, the relationship between ahruf and the qira'at. Okay, but guess what? Is this new? We have ulama, Islamic scholars, who have over 30 opinions about the nature of ahruf. The Muslim scholars are telling you that there is so much difference of opinion about the exact nature of the ahruf. Why do we need Western scholars to tell us this, and why do we need to be even worried about that?
Yeah.
Why do we, just because Western scholars are saying that we do not have enough information about the ahruf, okay, so what? Do we have the physical copies of the Quran from Uthman's time, from the time of the Prophet ﷺ? The answer is yes. We have the exact physical copies of the Quran from the life of the Prophet, from the life of Uthman, from the life of the other companions of the Prophet. We have physical copies we can look at, we can read, we can do a comparison between this copy and those copies, and it's exactly the same. So how does it have any bearing on the text of the Quran? What he's talking about is the nature of ahruf. What ahruf were actually like. Okay, just because ahruf were not preserved, okay, or ahruf were basically, the text of the Quran was brought down to the Qurayshi dialect. Okay, the nature of the pre-Uthmanic text, you know, scholars have many opinions about it, as I stated early. Some say it were spellings, some say it was about the order of the you know, the words in verses, not the order of verses, the words within a particular verse, the order of words in a particular verse. For example, the variations are about plural and singular. The variations are about feminine and masculine wording. Okay, so these are slight variations to make the text convenient for the Arab tribes and their dialects. Okay, they were there. Okay, the exact nature of these variations, scholars differ. Scholars of Islam differ. So if the Western scholars are calling them holes in our narrative, let them call it holes. Who cares? Who cares? Are they holes? No, they're not holes. We have more than enough information to know what the Quran is. So if you ask me what to write in a blank notebook, if I was asked to write the Quran, I would write that Quran we saw on the screen. Period.
And I think one of the things you've really established very clearly today, Adnan Bhai, is that just because there are different opinions in regards to the ahruf, it has no logical bearing on the preservation of the Quran, on the Quran.
No. Okay, let me state this is a very good point. Thank you for raising that point. Just because there were variations, God revealed variations. Let me clarify. Let me state this very, very clearly, categorically. We will, inshallah, use this video once and for all to deal with these matters. God revealed variations in the pre-Uthmanic text. Allah revealed the variations. Allah revealed the ahruf. Allah revealed 7 different modes and styles of reading the Quran to accommodate the different styles of the Arabs, the different styles of speaking, the different speech in the Arabic language of the Arabs. To accommodate that, Allah revealed 7 different modes to the Prophet. Okay, those variations have no bearing whatsoever on the text of the Quran. I repeat, those variations have no bearing whatsoever on the text of the Quran. Okay, because what is the text of the Quran? Coming from the Prophet and his companions. What is it? Put it on the screen again.
Let me bring you up.
Why we keep doing it, so people don't forget what we're talking about. You have it?
Yep, it's all
This
saved.
is what we are talking about. This is exactly what we are talking about. This is what we're talking about. This, the variations in ahruf, the different styles of the Arabs reading the Quran before the days of Uthman, or before the recension, the standardization of Uthman, has no bearing on this particular text, which comes from the life of the Prophet ﷺ and his companions. Okay? And the qira'at, okay, the different readings, okay, variant readings of the Quran have no bearing on this text of the Quran, which is physically available to us today from the 1st century CE, 1st century of Islam and 7th century CE. Okay,
Yeah.
so from the life of the Prophet of Islam.
As we're going into details, such detail, I think if you can take a few minutes to clarify now, one thing we've established: the text is clear cut. We've
Yes,
done
this is the consonantal ductus.
Yeah.
What we see on the screen is the consonantal structure of the Quran, of the text.
Yeah.
This is the physical reality of the Quran. How it is read is another science, which is dealt with by the qira'at, the science of qira'at.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
this is read is a different science. Yeah.
Yeah. So talking about that science, I know we don't have time to go into detail now. We're already at almost 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
But when we talk about the different qira'at, the different readings that we have, what Hafs and Warsh being the predominant in the world that most Muslims are aware of, right?
Yes.
That we read and recite in the mushaf that we have that's printed.
Yeah. Yeah.
How did they arrive to us in a very simple, quick way, if you can?
The oral transmission of Hafs and Warsh, and it goes back directly to the companions of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, how they read the Quran, okay, and how they pronounce certain words, okay, and these pronunciations were delivered to the future generations, and the chains are uninterrupted. The chain of transmission up to our day, okay, is the chains are uninterrupted, going back to the companions of the Prophet of Islam, people like Abdullah bin Masud, people like Ali bin Abi Talib, people like Ubay bin Ka'b, okay, people like Zayd bin Thabit, okay. These chains go back to these companions who not only wrote down the Quran physically, they taught how to read it as well. This is how you pronounce certain words. Brother Imran, we have instructions on how to prolong a word. How to prolong a word. You know, when we read غَيْرِ الْمَغْضُوبِ عَلَيْهِمْ وَلَا الضَّالِّينَ, even this has been transmitted to us from the companions. This length. Okay, this length. Okay, how we pronounce this. Okay, if I was to read that copy from the 1st century, we saw on the screen, okay, I would read waladhalin. I would read it like that. Okay, that's the physical reading of it, but the oral delivery of it has also been preserved. That's where the variations are. That's where the variations are, because scholars of the Quran, of course, they, for example, there are 8 differences between Warsh and Hafs. Slight differences, like the one I gave you earlier, Malik and Malik. Malik and Malik. Malik and Malik. This is regarded as a variation between Hafs and Warsh. Allahu Akbar. Okay, so the variations of that, the reading are so tiny that they don't affect, the text is there, the text is uniform in front of you, right? So that's it. This is what I wanted to clarify. Let's move on to the rest of Dr. Yasir Qadhi's treatment of this, and go ahead, please.
Academy, that they're bringing forth issues. Their level of now knowledge is leaps and bounds above what it used to be, 100 years ago. What is happening in the last few years is not me anymore. It's the Western academics. These problems are now becoming mainstream, and by and large, our ulama in the Eastern world are not aware, by and large, of what's going on in the Western side of things. And they're not...
Okay, pause there, please. Dr. Yasir Qadhi is simply I'm not going to say he's confused. He's a learned man, and I wish he was challenged on this by Muhammad Hijab. Okay, when he says our scholarship is unaware, I don't know what he's talking about. Wallahi, there are chunky volumes written on Qira'at, and Western scholars are miskeens. They are relying upon information that comes from our scholars. Where are Western scholars getting information from? Are they digging? Do they have these Indiana Jones hats on, and they go to the Middle East and they start digging in the mountains and the caves, and they're finding new texts and new books, and they're basing their theories on those? Oh, all what is coming from Western scholars is based upon entirely from our scholars, from the Arabic works written by our scholars in the classical period and in the modern period. I don't know what Dr. Yasir Qadhi is talking about, that our scholars are not aware of these problems. They are aware of every single problem, if you want to call it a problem. Okay, the questions Western or Orientalists are raising about the exact nature of, for example, the ahruf, okay, are not new questions. They are known to the scholars of Islam. They are the ones who transmitted these questions and these opinions, right? As I said, they have no bearing on the text of the Quran, the physical text, the morphology, the consonantal ductus, the consonantal skeleton of the words of the Quran, as we saw on the screen. Okay, let's go. Let's go.
That was the end of the video.
That's the end of the video. So that's it, brothers and sisters. We have gone on for 2 hours, 20 minutes. We thought we're going to do it in half an hour. But as you know, how passionate myself and Brother Imran are about this topic, we wanted to deal with this topic once and for all. I hope we have not left any question, any major question, that we didn't address. Alhamdulillah, we have addressed most major questions, and we will continue to do so in the future. I will make a shorter video, inshallah, in the future, which will be uploaded on my channel, as to how we can read a first century Quran from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, so that people can know what we have from the life of the Prophet and from the first century of Islam, and how these Christian missionaries and Islamophobes are a bunch of liars when they say the Quran is not preserved. What are you talking about? It's like saying the sun doesn't exist. The sun does not exist. They are blind. They are blinded by hatred. They are blinded by agenda. They are blinded by evil intentions. They have evil intents. Some of these people, they simply lie because they are paid money to lie. They know they're lying, but and why they're lying is because they're making money. Islamophobia is a multi-million dollars industry. A lot of people are getting rich by it. So why not these Christian missionaries? Why not? They have jumped on the bandwagon, and they are a bunch of liars. Even Christians know they are a bunch of liars. So please keep in mind, the first century Quran we read from, it comes from the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his companions, according to the scholarly opinion and radiocarbon dating. Then what we talked about, when it comes to the origin and the nature of the ahruf, okay, it has been discussed. Then Western scholarly quotes on the preservation of the Quran and the Uthmanic standardization of the text, and whether what we have in this modern copy today is exactly what can be found in the first century's copies of the Quran, and a list of those Qurans from the first century and their pictures can be found on islamic-awareness.org. If you go to the Quran section and click the manuscript section, you will see a lot more detailed study. Thank you so much for being with us, Brother Imran. Jazakallah khairan. I hope we have done justice to the topic somewhat. We cannot do justice to the topic because it's such a vast topic, but we have done somewhat. We have tried to cover to the best of our abilities. We are students. We are still learning. And if we have made any mistakes, my brothers and sisters, please forgive us. That was not our intent. Our intention is to defend the Quran, defend the veracity of Islam, defend Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and his deen. Okay, that was the intention. So if we made a mistake, if we made an error in any shape or form, please forgive us. Do not hold it against us and correct us, and we will stand corrected. We will stand corrected. Okay, we gave evidence for every single thing we talked about. Okay, so jazakumullah khairan. Wa alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.
Before we wrap up, first and foremost, Jazakallah khairan. To be honest, I learned a lot through today's session. Like, I've just been enlightened by so many things that I didn't know prior to this. So this has been brilliant, and I'm sure everyone else watching has benefited as well. So brothers and sisters, a few things. Number one, Brother Adnan is going to upload this video. I don't know if he's going to do the full or parts. It's up to him. He's going to upload it onto his channel. very soon in the next couple of hours. So make sure you go over there first and foremost, watch the video, like the video, and share it everywhere. Please share it everywhere. Very, very important. Secondly, if anyone that's been watching, if you like, and I would really ask if someone can do this, maybe timestamp certain parts of this live stream, because it's such a long live stream, with certain topic titles, so people can easily access the different parts, because we discussed loads of different topics along the way. So to do that as well, make sure also to subscribe and click the notification bell, and also to share this when it comes up on this channel. Maybe it'll pop up tomorrow, because it's going to be processing, especially being a 2.5 hour long video. It's probably going to take a long time processing till it fully emerges on the channel. So do that, definitely do that. Make sure to subscribe to Brother Adnan Rashid's channel as well. And also, anyone that watches this post live, when it pops up, if you leave comments, please let us know your thoughts in the comment section as well. And if there's anything relevant, I will share it with Brother Adnan and he can address it too. Maybe Adnan can have a look at those comments too, inshallah. Anything else you want to say, Adnan, before we wrap up?
That's it. I've said a lot, and I don't think there's anything left to say. And with regards to study, if you want to study this topic in detail, yes, please consult islamicawareness.org. Muhammad Sheikh Al-Azami's book, The History of the Quranic Text from Revelation to Compilation. These are the two main sources I would start with, inshallah ta'ala. And there is a lot in Arabic, so I don't think there's a point of mentioning those books. But if you want to study in detail, then these are the two sources to start with. Islamic-awareness.org, which is available easily to everyone, and the book can be bought from online platforms. The History of the Quranic Text from Compilation to Revelation, the 2nd edition.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. May Allah bless you. Jazakallah khair, everyone. May Allah bless you. Jazakallah khair. We're going to go now.
Subhanakallahumma wa bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu alayk. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen.